Hi there. So I'm Jon Hammant. So you're going to talk today about skills and DevOps and some of the ways that you can build skills and you can do different things. So hopefully interesting. Go through some of the stuff that we've done, how it works, and I think at the moment it is a really unique time for people. There is so much demand for skills within tech. There is a huge skill shortage out there. That is just the reality of it. So it's extraordinarily useful. And I think fundamentally the way that people learn and the things that we do are starting to change. And I think we are all extraordinarily fortunate of the career that we're in and what we're doing. And thank you very much, Tony. You guys are really good. It's really good doing things like that. It's nice to be back. Cool. So we'll just do a brief agenda. So I suppose, who am I? What are skills for people that don't know it? Because they're different things. It sounds very basic, but it's good to understand. How do we assess ourselves? How do we look at our own skills? What are typical skill shapes? So this might be things you've heard before when you've talked about different shapes of engineers. So I, T, E-shaped engineers. I think all of those are kind of a bit less than optimal. I think actually this undersells the way that skills work and the way that learning works in itself. What do we do at Amazon? How does that work? How does it relate to skills? Because I actually think skills and innovation are extraordinarily closely linked. A bit of how do people learn and kind of some next actions that you can take. Fundamentally, ideally everyone takes something from this, they go and do something good, and they do something good, and that's kind of what I want to do. So who am I? So Jon Hammant. So I lead the compute business for AWS for UK and Ireland, which is pretty cool, actually. I'm extremely lucky to do it. I've got some Amazonians here as well. And that is literally a huge part of AWS. So that's, I'm not even going to list them all, honestly. It's networking, all of EC2, containers, serverless, flexible compute, load of other stuff, and even kind of all weird bits of esoteric computing that I get to play with that I really like. So autonomous vehicles, quantum computing, all kinds of fun stuff. And I think that kind of comes into some of the bits of the talk. So I'm very lucky that I've kind of got myself into this broad skill set that I work with. And where I've started to realise, actually, those are the people that are really hard to do. So partly this talk is kind of selfish from my perspective, because ideally what we do is we show people what's interesting, and then you lot go and learn interesting stuff, and then we all go and do interesting things together. And so that's kind of the reason behind the talk. So what are skills? So we can break skills into two main groups because it's worth doing. So we have hard skills, we have things like Python, we have cloud computing, we have sales, we have learning French, which I was rubbish at as a GCSE. And then we have the kind of soft skills. So we have creativity, empathy, adaptability, resilience, persuasion. And I think one thing is we start on this. So what's interesting, and I've definitely found through my career, is people tend to think, right, these are the ones that you're going to learn, and you're going to sit down, you're going to learn a book of how to learn Python, and same thing I did, learn Ansible, all of it. And you can't learn these. These are just things that make you, but that's really not true. And so before we get into any of this, you can, and it sounds really like an obvious thing to say, but you can definitely learn soft skills, and they're as important, if not more, than some of the other things. And there's fantastic books. There's a brilliant book by Robert Cialdini called Persuasion, randomly, about how to persuade people. And all of these soft skills are just as learnable as the hard skills. So really do, as we go into that, if you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, I'm great at Python and cloud computing and this, but I'm kind of a bit rubbish at the soft skill side of things, like think of your personality around it, of where you get benefit and where you learn. And they're both as, but it's good to us remember, hard skills, soft skills, kind of broken down in that way. And then we can think of skill trees. So this is an example out of the game Watch Dogs, some of you may have played. And you kind of, with this, these are all fictional, so there's about shooting guns, and there's there's like a stealth one around here as well. And they're kind of, how you grow through the skills that you have effectively. So, whether you learn one thing first, how you relate it around. And this is the whole thing where I think we're starting to get to a point, I think, where it's good to remember that skills are really interconnected. There's this really rich web of what you can do and where it comes across. And, genuinely, if I look at development of people, often for technical people, the best thing you can do for your career is learning something that's non-technical. And I know that might not seem, and I'm not trying to just push everyone into this grey mass of like pointy-head managers like out of Dilbert, but genuinely it helps. It helps to broaden your skills around it. So we'll go into what are typical skill shapes. And it's kind of good to know. I mean, I'm not sure how many people will have heard of these or not, but genuinely, if I'm talking on the other side of the fence, when we're looking at hiring, this is kind of how people tend to describe folk, for good or bad. So we start with Eyeshaped. So Eyeshaped is kind of the traditional skill shape that you imagine people would have. So it's being really, really good at one thing. So you drive down one deep area of skill. And I think, in a way, we all have the education system, for people in the UK, the education in the system in the UK kind of drives you towards this. So if you think of your path through life, you start and you do GCSEs and you go into A-levels and O-levels, and you gradually kind of come down this skill tree to a point where actually you go and you do you might do your university degree, you might do a PhD, and you become even more laser focused on this one thing. And that's really good, and be really clear, we need really skilled people. However, the world is kind of changing in a bit, actually. I think more and more it's kind of changed because some of these deep things, I can use deep skills from people that I've never met before in every way. And cloud computing kind of gives you that to an extent. If I want to work out deep algorithmic depth on a really hard problem, like CFD, really in depth, I don't need to know that anymore. Actually, what I need is the critical thinking around it to see how these things interact. And so, the world of business starts to adopt to these kind of things. It starts to move around it. So then we had and some of you may know this, there was suddenly what we need T-shaped engineers, T-shaped engineers. And you kind of end up with T-shaped people. And T-shaped is a lot more fun in my view. So T-shaped is when you come in, you've got one really good area of skill. So you might say, for example, I am really flipping good at Python, and I know that all the way down. But then actually on top of it, you have this area of breadth where you come around and you know Python and you understand memory, and so you end up in this kind of rough T-shape where you've got this broad cross-discipline knowledge, and you've got your one area skill, and that was kind of good. And but you kind of get into this point if you've ever managed teams of people or run big teams, well, you want more. One T on the thing, that's not enough. So let's actually try and think more. So then it kind of changed again, and it went, well, actually, what we want are C or E-shaped people, and it's really weird. And you guys must see this. I'm sure you get people asking you for people like, what I want are T-shaped engineers or E-shaped engineers. And again, that's kind of similar. It's this broad cross-discipline knowledge, but the difference here, you have multiple different bits. So you might be really good at, let's say, REST. You might know REST really well. You might be really good at serverless. And you kind of get to this point where you start to have more bits around it. And the problem with all of this is, as weird as it sounds, this is literally how the industry thinks of skills at the moment. And I think that's not a very good thing. I mean, be really honest with you. I think this is just a massive, massive oversimplification, and it's just incorrect. Because there's massive problems with this, like huge problems. I mean, even like you're all computer scientists or like people interested, you can see the huge challenge that you have with this. Because it takes all the skills as being separate and distinct. It takes the fact that you know Python as being separate from the fact that you know REST, or the fact that you know REST being separate from the fact you know from serverless, and so on and so forth. You end up with this kind of bit where you're starting to tell people, well, the way you grow your skills is either by kind of knowing a bit of everything across there, or by knowing individual pillars, and that's just not the way the world works. And if I look at where it's changing more and more, we're coming into this interestingly kind of democratically structured way where you can pull all these different things together. So I disagree with it fundamentally. That's kind of the way that everyone thinks about it. So, and I think it makes it challenging when you look at what skill you're going to do next. Because if you're thinking of yourself as a T-shaped engineer, you're kind of looking at it going, well, actually, what I want is go to a C shape and go to, and that's where I should train next. And I think that's fundamentally not the right way. So we're getting to what I think is right, which is my opinion, I suppose. So one other thing as well, so before we get into the next bit, depth is really important. So I'm not in any of this, I'm not saying don't get deep in one technology, because for me, if I look through my career, I managed to get into this crazy situation because I got very, very good at low latency. I got very good at low latency randomly because I used to write demos on an Amiga years and years ago, and I quite liked 6800, and it made me think that every kilobit is sacred, effectively. So depth is really, really important, and not saying it isn't. But how I like to think of people's skills, and how I'd recommend all of you when you're kind of doing overall skill management, is kind of thinking at yourself almost like a Venn diagram, if that makes sense. Because I think that's just a much better way of doing it. So where you suddenly learn you're good at Python, you know REST APIs, and you know cloud computing. And what's really good at this point is you suddenly end up with this combination that makes you special, that makes you unique, that makes you really valuable, because all of a sudden you've got this kind of, you're good at all these things and they cross over and they complement each other. And then you can kind of think to it, well, actually, how am I going to start to add to my skills? What am I going to do to build my skills? Because the brilliant thing about this career for me, we get paid to learn. I mean, that's just cool, however you cut it, honestly. We're literally knowledge workers. We are valued on our knowledge. And we have that in a career where some of the things on here weren't here a few years ago. So if we think about things like Kubernetes, F1 wants Kubernetes. Kubernetes is really, really new. That's the reality. If this was a surgeon's conference and we were talking about the inner workings of the heart has been the same for a very, very long period of time. Okay, yeah, we know more about it, but it's the same. Whereas the opportunity that all of us have is we can pick up new technology. So you could kind of say, well, I know all of this. I'm going to pick up something that's a bit newer. So I'm going to pick up some blockchain skills. I couldn't work out if there's a space or not in blockchain. So if anyone knows that, I'd love to know in all honesty. Or you could put something like Rust in here. You could put a new skill that people don't have. And then all of a sudden you go to this unique point where actually you've kind of got this even more special, unique thing that makes you really valuable. Because in the end of the day, if you're knowledge workers, what you've got to remember is your value is on the uniqueness of your knowledge. So your value is a combination of the uniqueness of your knowledge and the applicability and the demand for that knowledge. So the more you can kind of carve out these really interesting little bits, the better. And then, as you go through it, I think you can guess where this is going, you can kind of add more onto it. So maybe you turn around and go, well, actually, I'm going to learn something that isn't tech. I'm going to learn how to do presentations. And, for me, so I used to run the DevOps team in Accenture. We used to get constant arguments where the technical people, at first anyway, but it got better, the technical people didn't respect the people that were non-technical because they thought it was all easy. The non-technical people thought the technical people were just arseholes, if I'm honest. And then it just didn't get on because people didn't appreciate that actually they've just got different skills on this Venn diagram. There's people who can't. We've all got a habit of effectively generalizing ease in skills that you don't do, but it's important to know they're just as valuable. And for you to be, for people to fulfill their potential, it's about mixing these skills around. And you can kind of think, well, actually, we can do even more of them. And what you notice is all of a sudden you get this beautiful combination of power. So you don't just, when you add one more, you don't just add one more bubble here. In fact, you add all the intersections that go through them. So you add loads more abilities. All of a sudden, if you've added French onto that, you can suddenly do a presentation in French about blockchain using REST APIs. And so you end up with these really unique bits. And these unique bits have value, have real value as you go through. And what's interesting is if you start running the numbers through all of this, so it kind of gets going. There's some assumptions made in this, and people can by maths is interesting sometimes, the best way of putting it. So there's effectively a 50% distribution on the skills, but you can kind of roughly get it. And I know skills aren't equally distributed, so I'm not as stupid as I may seem sometimes. But so if you imagine these are the number of key skills you have. So we go through and you keep adding to those Venn diagrams. You keep thinking about how many combinations run through them. How many of these do you have to have before out of the 7.7 billion people globally, you become one, you become unique. You become the only person that has that skill set together. And actually, it's not that much. That's the weird thing about it. You get down to, if we have 33 unique skills, which are relatively rare and relatively well combined, you are unique globally. Statistically, you are unique globally. And that's a really, really cool thing because then you're really valuable because you are you're not one in a million, you're one in 7.7 billion. And that's pretty cool. And then if we take it, okay, well, 7.7 billion, a lot of them are IT workers, sadly. But actually, if you think about the UK IT population, so we took a stat I looked up online earlier, about 417,000 people in the UK do IT, roughly, give or take. So the internet said anyway. So at that point, actually, we go down, and actually, you only need about 22 unique skills, and you become really the singular person that does this in the UK. And the whole trick to doing it isn't just trying to go down the same piece and pick skills that other people are doing. It's to try and pick this rich tapestry of skills. So think outside of the usual skills. If everyone else is running and just picking up the same skills, think about the unique combinations that you can go through and you can get. So yeah, that's my view on skills. And I suppose I can talk about Amazon because it's always good. So how do we do it? Because it's good to talk about Amazon. Because I think in the end of the day, innovation and learning are extraordinarily close. They are literally brothers or sisters within the whole thing. I think with one, you don't get the other. I think if you don't have people that can learn easily, they can't innovate. I think if people can't innovate, they can't learn. It's relative. So how do we do it? So we use 4 key things, really. So we use mechanisms. So we use loads and loads of stuff. If ever you deal with people from Amazon, they'll all talk about mechanisms. And effectively, mechanisms are just easy choices. They're just things that we turn around and we go, well, to do this, I'm just gonna use a mechanism. I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. So whether that's either reporting or whether that's hiring people or whether that's just making decisions. So it's just getting to a point where those decisions, once you know it's a good thing, and in whatever business you work in, once you know something's a good thing, just set it as something that you do. Like you don't have to do it forever. And that's not saying these aren't unbreakable things, but just codify it. Say if you have a process for doing something, write down the process. And that sounds really obvious, but most people don't do it. Like most places I've ever worked didn't do that really. So build mechanisms in, build an architecture around it. So the whole thing with this, if you're going to be 1 in 7 billion or 1 in 417,000, build a structure around it that supports rapid growth, that supports rapid change, where you can roll through it. Let people play. I really, really think the more that you let people experiment and play around with how they do things, the better. That is the way that I learn. I think that's the way probably most people do learn. So make sure that the architecture there, one of the best things about the cloud is I can go and and this is any cloud provider, this is in no way a sales pitch, if that makes sense. You can go and you can spin up really cool stuff and you can see what it does and then you can blow it away again. Like, it's amazing. It's genuinely amazing. It's so far from the long-term purchasing cycle that exists. You can experiment, you can play, you can do that to learn, you can try new things, you can roll it through. And that's really, really important for learning, because the more you can experiment, the less it's just rote learning, the less it reminds me of my French GCSE, the better, quite honestly, because that wasn't success for me, and I don't think that's success for people in the future. The more you can do it, the better. And then we think about culture. So, for us, culture is key. Like culture eats everything else, quite honestly. You need to have the right people. You need to have them agreeing. You need to have them going the same way. And for us, we try and hire builders. We hire people that want to build stuff. I'm now I've got some businessy stuff I do. I've got some tech stuff I do. The way we build businesses is fantastic. So if we build a product, and I'd recommend other companies do this, so if we build a product, we build an MVP. So everyone heard of minimal viable products, the way it goes. So what we do as well is we build something called MDUs. So an MDU is a minimal deployable unit, a minimal deployable business. So when I'm starting new business in the UK, which we have, and there's more jobs coming, if anyone would like a job in any of this, we've got a load coming up, we start with a minimal deployable business. And that consists of one person who's if you think back to that skills Ven, we try and get 2 people that have an interesting mix, that complement in some points and are separate in other points. So we try and we'll start with a senior business development or specialist, and then we'll have a solution architect that sits with us. We try and do that from a cultural perspective. And then from an organisation perspective, I would recommend everyone, small, lean teams. That's the way to do it. Give people stuff to do and let them do it and roll through. And that's kind of how we do the organisational side. So a little bit more, but almost done. I can let you go to the next one. So I thought I'd ask my 6-year-old daughter, because she's always got something to say. And they're crap at lying. I shouldn't say this because she might watch the video. They're not very good at lying. So hopefully, if the magic of video works, we can get... I asked her, how do you learn? And she's got no idea what... She knows I do IT stuff, doesn't really understand what it is sometimes. So I thought it'd be good to get her view. And this is if the thing works. What makes you learn?
My teacher tells me to do stuff.
And you learn more from doing things or from reading things off the blackboard?
Doing things.
Doing things. And what's your favourite thing to do?
Maths and topic.
And what makes you remember maths and topic the best?
Sticking to topic and timetables for maths.
Thank you very much for your advice, Clara. Bye.
Bye.
So as the crazy child that she is, so how does she remember things? How does a 6-year-old remember things? So she's told them by the teacher on the blackboard, but how does she actually remember? She remembers them by doing them. And I think we kind of forget that a lot of the time. We remember them by doing things. Remember them doing by things that we find interesting more than anything. So going to a point, the reason I didn't like French was because I was told randomly, le singe sur la table. And although I remember that one phrase, I've got no idea of its context with anything else other than the monkey is under the table. And So what you want to do is you want to, when you're learning, that's the wrong button. There we are, sorry. So you want to think how you learn. As you're going to this next bit, how do you learn? So this is I think this is quite interesting. And sadly, I'm in the top bit, because this is, I think, categorised as a lecture, I don't know, roughly. Maybe a discussion group, we'll say it's a discussion group for the sake of this. And this is the retention rates of learning after 1 week on average. It's an American study. It's quite interesting, actually, if you read the full study. And effectively, what I find really interesting about it, if you genuinely want to remember stuff, don't just read it or watch a video of it, because most of it you forget. Do it, as weird as it sounds. That is really, really the thing. And I think our training is, a lot of training is set up really, really badly. And don't just do the, oh, I've spun an EC2 machine, it's fantastic. I've shut it down, oh, it's fantastic. Do things that interest you. This is a fun subject. You can choose to do stuff that's fun. And so the other thing you should do is learn about yourself, genuinely. People don't spend enough self-time introspecting on themselves and how they learn and what they do. I take everything if I don't put it in a task list, I forget it, I've got a terrible memory. Learn about yourself and how to do it. And then so on the learn by doing side of things, so what do I recommend? So there's two resources I'll show, and then I'm done. So there's the AWS resources, and there's another resource I think, actually, if I'm totally honest with you, I think is probably better sometimes, but they're different things depending on what you're trying to learn. So let's go for the AWS one first. So you can learn in-demand cloud skills. We offer loads of free training. It's really good. There's about 500 free courses. I'll send links at the end of it. It's really good. It's free. It's just worth doing. When you think about some of the specific point skills that you want to learn to make yourself that 1 in 7.7 billion or however it goes, they're just really worth doing, quite honestly. And then secondly, the other thing we do is certification. So certification is really, really worthwhile. If you are looking for a job, go out and get certified, because the time or the money that it will take you to get certified in tech will pay back unbelievably quickly. And I cannot stress that enough. It's probably the best investment. I genuinely think, Funding Circle is an interesting one of investing in people. I don't know whether you guys do this or not, sorry. I'm guessing not, but I don't know. Sorry. No, but I think getting to a point where you invest in people, and I think people don't take enough of you're working in a career. If you can raise your pay by a couple of % per year for doing a couple of £1,000 course or taking, it's really worth it. If you're looking for a job, go and do certification. I cannot stress it enough in every way. So these are really good. They're free. Would really recommend it. All this. So what I think is one of the best ways of doing it as well is Reddit, actually. I genuinely think this is one of the best learning resources that you will find, and people don't use it enough. So there's a subreddit called SelfHosted, and effectively it calls itself, it is self-hosted alternatives to popular services. So it's you can say, for example, the thing on here at the moment randomly is something about open source alternatives to Google Firebase. There's loads of stuff on there, everything from picture libraries to anything. And what you can do is you can take the software on here, you can properly, if you want to learn how to do it, you can run it through CI, you can roll it into Docker, you can check it out when it goes into its GitHub, and you can deploy it into a cloud provider or onto your own server. I've got a server in my basement that runs a load of this stuff, and I run loads of my cloud account. And it is so worthwhile. I cannot describe enough. If you can get, I've interviewed and talked to people over the years, if you can go to a situation where you can effectively set up some bit of software off here, it doesn't really matter what it is, and you can automatically wait until there's a change checked into GitHub, you can turn it into a container, you can deploy the container successfully, and you can test that it's running. You are ready for really interesting roles within DevOps and all kinds of bits of growth. And it's just such a good resource for it. And it's just one that people don't, because otherwise, how do you learn? There's no way you can learn enterprise software. None of us are buying Oracle Rack, thankfully. So it's fantastic. So I'd really recommend doing that. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. So get trained, think of lots of skills, go and do interesting stuff that's different, learn something new, learn something that's orthogonal to you, and get it in a situation that adds to your overall ability.